From the Basement, the only blockchain podcast that interviews the forgotten and downtrodden devs that actually do the work. Hosted by me, Martin G. And one of those downtrodden devs is Adam Dry. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Martin.
And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Adam's experience and advice for integrating Kordo apps into incumbent systems, so you can move your proof of concept into production. Now, Adam, we know each other really through Ryan Gledhill. And me recruiting for IfNo, but I'm sure many of the people listening might not know you or probably don't know you. So let's crack on with these 20 questions, shall we?
Sure, that's it.
Okay, first up, what company do you work for?
So I work for IfNo. So IfNo do instant value transfer. So it's kind of real time, 24/7.
Great. What do you do there?
So my job title is head of technology. Being a small company, I wear many hats. So mostly around the product delivery kind of area.
Do you have a nickname?
Not really, just Ad.
Ad. Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Not everyone can have a cool nickname like Bartman, I suppose.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah.
No. How old were you when you started programming, Adam?
I was 12 when I taught myself to program in Visual Basic 6. Back in the days before YouTube or Udemy or anything like that, I had a book and a hooky copy of Visual Studio, and off I went.
Amazing, a hooky copy.
Yeah, my dad knows a guy who knows a guy, right? And he just burnt me some discs. So yeah.
I love it. Burnt me.
Yeah. Back when you had like the cases that held about 4 CDs or something in them for Visual Studio. So.
Where did you grow up?
In Essex, so near Colchester, basically.
Near Colchester. Is that one of the many tiny villages near Colchester?
So, yes, that's right. Yeah. Very sleepy village. I think we had a corner shop, which actually my parents ran for a little while, but that was about it.
Okay, small town, small village guy.
Yeah.
Where did you go to uni and what did you study?
So I didn't go to uni, so I went to college after school, and then I had enough of further education and wanted to just get into the world really, so yeah, glad I did.
I've interviewed 3 people now for this, and not a single one of them have gone to uni. I think I need to change this question.
Yeah.
Right. When did you start working in software?
So when I was about 18. So once I'd left college, got myself a junior programming job in VB6 and Microsoft SQL Server for the grand sum of £12,000 a year, I think it was. So yeah, but it beat working at Little Chef. So yeah.
Okay. When did you start working? No, so which industry have you spent most of your career in?
That's a good question. I don't really have one answer for that. So I probably spent about 5 years building digital dictation software for legal firms. Okay. And then I spent probably about 3 or 4 years in construction, and probably 3 or 4 years in FinServe, and then a few years in telecoms as well.
Wow. Okay. What's your operating system of choice?
It has to be Ubuntu or anything Linux based that isn't Mac OS. Used to be a Windows programmer, but yeah, definitely a fan of Linux these days.
Amazing. What's your programming language of choice then?
So these days it's got to be TypeScript. Big fan of Node, but not a big fan of not strongly typed languages. So which JavaScript obviously is duck typed. So TypeScript came along and changed that and made it more of a closer to a strongly typed language. So yeah, TypeScript would be my choice at the moment.
So you moved on from VB6 then?
I have moved on from VB6. Yeah.
When was the last time you wrote some code and what did it do?
Oh, good question. So I think it was a few days ago. Well, I was on holiday at the end of last week, so I think it was the start of last week, and I think it was to help us also generate our sandbox environment, so a little private Kordo network. So it's a bit of DevOps work essentially, and that was written in TypeScript.
Awesome. What is your favourite music to listen to whilst you code?
I still listen to the same music that I listened to when I was like 17. So
Go on, come on, tell us.
So so kind of like pop punk, like Blink 182. A bit ska, Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake.
Oh, really?
Bit of old school ska. Madness, the Specials, stuff like that.
Yeah, Specials. Yeah.
Yeah. But it has to be stuff that I know. If it's new stuff, I find I can't focus as well.
It distracts you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Name one skill all programmers should have.
Attention to detail, I think, is something that you have to have. At the end of the day, computers are extremely finicky. They're very picky, and you can't sort of just bend what you're saying to make them do what you want. You have to tell them exactly what you want them to do. So yeah, I think attention to detail is certainly up there.
Agile. Is Agile a force for good or for bad?
Oh, it's controversial, isn't it, Agile? I think it's got to be one of the most overused or certainly misused terms in the industry, really. So definitely good. I think waterfall is not the way to go. These, I think we all know that front loading the design and build process like that is super high risk. And I think the thing with Agile, I think they put these rule books out like Scrum and Kanban, and people follow them to the letter, and they don't really understand the actual underlying benefits that those rules are trying to give you. And every team's different, every environment's different. So you follow the rule book to the letter, and you're not really getting the benefits because they don't quite work for you. I think once you have worked in those environments a little bit, you understand the underlying benefits, and then you can kind of bin the rule book off more or less, and kind of build your own rules based on your own circumstances, and still get those underlying benefits that they're trying to push you towards. So I think it's good. I think it's unintuitive, and you probably need a bit of experience and a bit of help to really make it work.
So basically, you're any Scrum Master's favourite team member.
Yeah, well, having been a Scrum Master in the past, yeah, I know the pitfalls. Yeah.
All right. Do you or have you ever owned any Bitcoin?
I have got a small amount of Bitcoin. Yep, I'm certainly not going to be a crypto millionaire anytime soon, but yes, I do have a little bit of Bitcoin and a little bit of ETH as well.
Okay. How long have you been using Kordo for?
About a year and a half. So yeah, I started I was freelancing actually for IfNo, and I did a bit of kind of DevOps work around that, helping them with the trial and things, and then and then obviously the rest of the year actually working permanently at IfNo.
Okay. Why did you get into Kordo in the first place?
I think we've already mentioned Ryan Gledhill, so he was the reason really. So having worked in the past with Ryan, he came to me and said, "Look at this new, cool, exciting thing that we're doing. Do you want to come and give us a hand?" Really. So that's how it all started.
Amazing. What's the best thing about Kordo?
So I think from a developer point of view, I suppose the flow framework really, because it is so flexible and pretty easy to use. It's normally used or the most common task, I suppose, is to sort of build a transaction, collect signatures, things like that. But you can just use it as a messaging system as well. So that it's quite a raw kind of protocol, if you like. So it's quite flexible in that sense. And I suppose a bit of a higher level from a business analyst kind of point of view and this leads on from that, I suppose, is the peer-to-peer nature of it. I think that just unlocks so many different use cases that the kind of public ledger, the gossip protocol type stuff doesn't lend itself to.
What would you say is the worst thing about Kordo?
So I'm not a fan of the way Java sort of dependencies work, and I'm not really a fan of Gradle either. I find it quite kind of difficult to manage. So probably that side of it. That's probably more of a generic Java complaint, I suppose, than Kordo specific. So if I had to go Kordo specific, probably maybe the error messages. I tend to find that the errors sometimes are not particularly descriptive and don't help you that much in solving the problem. But yeah, probably okay. That.
All right, Adam Dry, Kordo man who doesn't like seeing error messages.
Yeah, well, who does? See red, right?
All right, what's your favourite Kordo open source library?
Oh, so probably have to be the token SDK. I think that's it's pretty widely used and it has a lot of applications.
Yeah. And then what's the best place to start learning Kordo?
Go to Kordo Code Club. That's got to be
yes.
No, I mean, so that I suppose, and jumping on the public Slack channel, and obviously just going through the documentation, go through the official stuff, and read, I suppose, and and just try it out. It's not too hard to just get a template and start kind of mucking about. So roll your sleeves up and jump in.
Amazing. Right. All right, cool. So look, we want to talk about integration. I guess, with incumbent systems, and how you move on from POC to production. I guess we better set the scene a little bit more, though, before we get into that, and just find out a bit more about what Treasury does, because you mentioned value transfer, I think, systems, and you said 24 hours, but
yeah.
Value transfer sounds really kind of vague and non-specific to me. So what exactly does IfNo do?
Yeah, so I mean, IfNo itself at its core is a value transfer app. So that's what we do. So it's a utility layer application. So we're not a full treasury management system or invoice management system or anything like that. We're a cog in those processes, if you like. So that's the core of what IfNo does. We have a few kind of products.
So
sorry, go on.
So why do you say value transfer? Why don't you say like money transfer or like asset transfer?
Yeah, good question actually. So the we have a global cash or cash equivalent token that it's HQLA level 1, and that can be transferred between any entity globally that's obviously an IfNo participant. But we
what did you say? What does HS?
So HQLA, so high quality liquid assets. So so that's important for banks and financial institutions because it allows them to allocate that to their liquidity buffers and things like that. It's important for them. So for regulation purposes. So so that's one thing. But we have some other products as well. So that allow the transfer of other assets. So in other words, you can digitize other assets and then move those tokens around between entities, and that can be intra-organizationally. So between different geographically located offices for the same company, or it could be between companies as well. So yeah.
So who would be your target? Who's your target audience? Who's most likely to use your product?
So it's going to be banks and FMIs and large financial institutions, but also large corporates. That's another market as well that would definitely benefit from our software.
So banks and large corporates use IfNo's products to transfer assets and value in the form of other digital assets to other companies.
That's right, yeah, or internally between themselves, yeah.
And but that that's what Kordo does, right? So why would these companies use? What's the difference between the companies just using Kordo and the companies using IfNo?
Sure. So no, it's a good question. So one of the things that differentiates IfNo from other kind of tokenizing companies on the market, certainly as an approach. So before I joined, so when the founders were kind of developing the organization and the plan and everything, they deliberately took an approach that they would tackle the quite complicated legal and regulatory structure that you need in order to do something like this. So if you're going to tokenize an asset, so there's an underlying asset that backs the token. So the token itself is not a cryptocurrency. So like Bitcoin doesn't have anything that backs it. It just has value. This isn't that. This is a tokenization of an underlying asset. So there are complications in that. How do you regulate the issuance and the destruction of those tokens? How do you deal with the custodianship of the underlying asset? How do you get the assets in and out of that custodian? Things like that. It's quite complicated, and it's complicated on two channels, if you like, two levels. One of those is the legal and legal and regs side, and the other is obviously the technology side. So sorry, go on.
So the point is, that IfNo, it's not just some like backstreet tokenization shop. not that I think they exist, but it's not some backstreet dodgy tokenization shop. It's a gold-plated, regulatory compliant tokenization product.
Yeah.
So you tokenize assets, and you then provide a service to manage them with.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And we tackled the legal and reg stuff first before we built the technology side of it, because I think the technology side probably is slightly easier, or certainly more common, I suppose. So it's a sensible way of tackling it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all the companies, the other companies I know in this financial services space. They've gone that way around as well, and it does seem that that's precisely the mistake a lot of the other pre-Kordo, non-Kordo tokenization shops have taken, where they thought they'd solve the tech first. And then that's why there were all these Ethereum dApps wandering about with nobody using them.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah.
All right, so we've set the scene a bit now and established what IfNo does. Let's get down to the business of the day and talk about integrating Kordo apps into incumbent systems. First up, why integrate into existing systems at all? Why not just provide your Kordo app as a service?
Well, I mean, the Kordo apps that people build are there to solve DLT problems. They're not there to solve existing problems. So if you think about maybe treasury management systems or margin management systems, things like that, there's loads of logic in there to handle the way that flows internally in the business, and to calculate where money should be going and when, and things like that. That's not DLT specific. There's only one party involved in how they manage their treasury management, and that's themselves. So there's no multiple party, there's no kind of trust problem, there's no two or more locations that this data needs to be represented in, which is of course what DLT is all about. So you wouldn't write that. I don't think you should write that into a Kordo app. You probably want to keep that separate. Kordo apps are a bit more difficult to upgrade than traditional systems, because you've got the flow draining thing. You've got to take the system offline, which means you're no longer receiving messages from other participants on the network. And if you're doing that to upgrade something that's just a piece of logic inside the Kordo app that's not actually anything to do with the ledger or anything, that just doesn't sound like a sensible approach. So, and at the end of the day, you don't want to rewrite this stuff. If you're building a DLT application, it's got its own problems and its own challenges. You don't want to take on a bunch of challenges that have already been solved, probably better by someone else on the market. It makes a lot of sense to reuse those. So that's why you'd want to reuse the logic that's already existing there, but just replace the bits that will benefit from DLT. So you're going to need to
Okay.
integrate your DLT part into those existing apps.
And we're talking about integration with let's talk about that now. On what kind of systems have you integrated IfNo with then?
Well, margin management systems and treasury management systems are the main ones. But we'll talk about this in a little bit, I suppose. But the key thing that we do is make it as easy as possible to integrate with IfNo. So you can integrate anything. So you don't have to, for example, use a Java bytecode compatible language. It doesn't have to be a Java or a Kotlin app. So it can be integrated into anything really, but certainly, treasury management and margin management systems in big banks are the mainstay.
Got it. Okay. All right. All right. Well, let's talk about what. I mean, you were talking about big banks there. I mean, like, have you got any? What would you say is the most What would you say is the most challenging integration you've had to do to date then? And what is challenging about integrating your Kordo app with an existing system?
Sure. So, I mean, probably, I suppose it was the most challenging, but certainly the deepest integration that we've done is with one of our custodians, and just because they used a lot of the API endpoints, and a couple needed kind of tweaking, and which was fine. I mean, it all went very well, which is great. But they needed some extra bits, and I suppose that's one of the challenges with the APIs is that they're there to serve not just one customer; they're there to serve every customer. It's we don't develop bespoke. So the core API, we don't just develop that in a bespoke way for each customer. We develop that in a way that all customers can use. So it needs to be kind of generic and flexible, but at the same time easy to use. That's probably one of the challenges.
Okay, all right. So, what kind of considerations should you take when you're designing a Kordo app to make it easier to integrate it?
Yeah, so I think it's important to consider. So I think we talked about integration, and it is, I think, going to be important. I think for probably all Kordo apps, perhaps not all Kordo apps, but most Kordo apps are going to need to integrate into existing systems for the reasons that we've talked about. So that is a challenge that you're going to face as you start going into POC. That depending on the scope of the proof of concept, exactly what concept are we trying to prove, they might want to actually integrate with some test instances of their systems to prove that integration. So you are going to hit that challenge. So you want to make it as easy as possible for the customer to do that, to build their POC. So one of the things that we've done, and I think is quite core and quite key, I think, if you're gonna really take integration seriously, is building an easier interface than the RPC interface to integrate into the Kordo app. I think a lot of development teams won't be familiar with RPC, and that's kind of an immediate barrier. But also, you'd have to write your integration with a Java bytecode language, so Java or Kotlin, which again, the teams might not be Java or Kotlin, skilled up in either of those languages. So, so it ties you in a little bit. So I think putting an HTTP interface over the top is pretty key. I know feedback from our trial that we ran last year, the year before, was that an HTTP API was key. It was really important for them to have that. So taking that approach, you're breaking down barriers. So you're making it easier for the customer, and effectively cheaper as well, for them to build their POC. And they're going to probably have to sort of report that up higher and higher to try and get sign-offs and things to actually move into production. But if they can get that initial POC in there cheaper, then you've got more chance of them getting that signed off and more chance of engaging with that customer.
Yeah, so so have you got any tips or techniques that you could share with us that could help reduce some of those barriers to adoption?
Sure, yeah, something that we found that our customers found really useful was for the ability for us to create them little private sandbox networks. So it's a running instance of our application with two parties in there, and they could just integrate directly with that. So it's we do all the heavy lifting, if you like, of creating a private network. So creating a notary and the network map service and the different service nodes, the sort of custodian node and things that need to exist for the network to operate. So ultimately, what it means is that a development team can have no understanding of Kordo, and they're still able to write proof of concepts against our HTTP API on a real running instance of the application.
Amazing. And there you have it. There you have it. Well, I think that's a great note to finish it on. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through some of the stuff with me.
Sure.
And I wish you and the guys at IfNo all the very best, and very much looking forward to finding out the next stage. What happens next in the IfNo story.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, me too.
Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter to catch future episodes, and all previous episodes can be found at any of the best streaming services in town, as well as on YouTube. This show was created by me, Martin G, produced by my lowly house elf, Oscar Don't Give 'Em a Sock Bennett, and broadcast live from the basement.